Hello everyone. This is the 29th part of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Chapter 89, Kraken's Approval and New Exercise Partner. After healing himself off the dull ache in his body, Quinn decided to leave the vault for the day. He felt saturated from the day's work, between dodging the Kraken to get inside the vault and swirling inside the maelstrom. Quinn felt that he had his fill of adventure and action for today. Quinn walked to the tunnel and peered down into the water, and saw the lake end opening. He made a face between annoyance and fatigue and sighed, "I don't want to fight the Kraken. Not right now." He looked back around at the stone cave and wondered, should I take a short nap in here before I go back? Nah, let's just get this over with. The Kraken will just throw me out, which is what I want now, grumbled Quinn. He squatted down, and slipped down into the tunnel, head first. While swimming inside the tunnel, Quinn tried to feel the magic behind the tunnel, but it escaped his natural senses. He had no idea how the switch from up and down was done. I would need to actively try to cast magic to see what is behind the cover, thought Quinn as he came up from the tunnel. The first thing that he saw when he exited the tunnel were big solid yellow eyes staring down at him intently. "Whoa," exclaimed Quinn, and even though no sound came out, Quinn gulped in a fresh batch of lake water. The Kraken's tentacles immediately surrounded him. Unlike their previous encounters, the tentacles didn't coil around Quinn, but instead, one of the tentacles came near Quinn and poked him with its tip. The tentacle's tip was so large that it pushed against almost half of his entire body, pushing him to the ground. Quinn, who fell to the lake bed, looked up at the Kraken, who kept staring at him with big yellow eyes. Then, at that moment, he finally realized how enormous the Kraken really was. In the past, the biggest thing Quinn had seen was a mountain troll, but the Kraken was on another level. What? What does it want? Thought Quinn as he stared back at the Kraken. Does it want to eat me? I'm tired, but bring it on. He revved up his magic and readied for another bout. Quinn hoped for the Kraken to give him a ride to the shore. But if it wanted to fight, Quinn was going to give it one. It turned out that Kraken didn't want to fight because it withdrew its enormous body and assumed a comfortable position. One tentacle wrapped around the tunnel entrance, forming a coiled wall around the tunnel entrance, but didn't block it from above. Huh? What? Wondered Quinn bewilderedly. He had no idea why the Kraken backed off after some staring and a poke. Quinn didn't know that the reason the Kraken had stared him down was because it was checking if Quinn was all right. It wanted to check if Quinn happened to be fine after going inside the dangerous place. After it confirmed that Quinn was uninjured, it backed off and went back to his chill lake life. The Kraken didn't block the entrance as a show of his intentions. It was going to continue to guard the dangerous place in case another tiny human came looking, but if Quinn wanted to go in, he could go in because as far as the Kraken was concerned, Quinn had made it back alive after going in, so he probably would be fine if Quinn went in again. Plus, the Kraken was prideful and considered Quinn to be capable. Quinn had successfully made the Kraken move, and that in the Kraken's eyes was a sign of strength. As far as the Kraken was concerned, Quinn was strong and could handle himself. Quinn stared at the Kraken for a while before swimming away, still not knowing the reason behind the Kraken's actions. Scene break. "Why are you here again?" asked Quinn, stretching his body for his morning run and workout. Quinn looked to Eddie as both stood at the starting point of Quinn's daily run route. Yesterday after dinner, Eddie had informed Quinn that he would like to join him for his morning exercises. Quinn, who had been lost in thought, thinking about the third vault, had heard Eddie's words and had absent-mindedly nodded and hadn't asked for the reason. "About that. The Quidditch tryouts are in 2 months, and I was thinking about joining the team," spoke Eddie as he awkwardly tried to copy Quinn's stretching movements. "I want to pass the tryouts so that I can make the bench this year and then play on the field next year." Eddie knew that Quinn went for a run every morning, and decided to follow him to get fit for the coming tryouts so that he could have an extra edge. "I see. Quidditch, huh? I know you followed the sport but never knew that you wanted to play for the team," asked Quinn. He was happy that Eddie decided to do exercise to get fit. "I wasn't planning on joining the team before, but I decided to give it a try this year. It would be fun to play Quidditch for the house. Everybody would be looking while I play," replied Eddie, a bright smile on his face. "So what you mean to say is that you want to play so that you can get popular and get a girlfriend," said Quinn, reading between the lines and finding out the real reason behind his friend's sudden interest in playing Quidditch. Eddie unabashedly put a hand over Quinn's shoulder and gave him a lopsided grin. "You know me so well. No wonder we are so close." Quinn shook his head with a small smile before asking, "But are you sure you want to join the team? We have the Owless next year, you know. Will you be able to balance Quidditch and studies?" "I'll be fine. If I see my grades slipping, I'll have you tutor me. With you helping me out, I'll probably do better than I do now," responded Eddie and gave Quinn a thumbs up as if saying thank you in advance. "I'll help you out if you need it, but I'm going to only help you out with the practical side. I'm not good at explaining the theory," said Quinn, agreeing to help his friend. Eddie gave Quinn a silent stare before speaking. "So what you are implying is that you get frustrated when we don't understand things after you explain them once. In times like those, you probably think of us as monkeys, don't you?" This time Quinn put his hand on Eddie's shoulder, beamed, and unabashedly spoke. "You're right. We're close. Come on, give me a hug." But Eddie pushed Quinn away with a "fuck you, stay away" face. "All right, let's get started," said Quinn with a clap. "I usually run before doing push-ups, squats, and crunches. I finish by skipping rope." He pointed at Eddie and advised, "You should run a kilometer today and increase the length as you progress. Aim for a comfortable 3 kilometers before the tryouts. I would suggest that you focus more on your upper body because there are a lot of upper body movements while being on a broom. So I'd advise sit-ups, push-ups, and pull-ups. Later on, we can add planks and leg raises." "Also, what position are you planning to play?" asked Quinn after he was done suggesting an exercise plan. "Chaser," replied Eddie. "Great, now, I would suggest that you run at your pace. Don't try a full-on sprint. If you sprint, you'll build up fatigue quicker, and that won't do you any good," warned Quinn. Afterward, he told Eddie how much he needed to run to complete a kilometer. He then slapped Eddie on his back and ran away. Quinn still ran a 5-kilometer route every day. He hadn't tried to increase the distance because he did more things now, so he just tried to reduce his time and had been slowly getting faster with time. He usually ran a route that would be exactly 5 kilometers when he returned to the starting line. But today, Quinn decided to run a route that would have him pass nearby where Eddie was running so that Quinn could see how he was doing. When Quinn came around the first time, he saw Eddie standing with his hands on his knees, so he raised his voice and called out to Eddie, "Eddie! Don't stop. If you can't run, walk. Just don't stop." Eddie looked up and saw Quinn waving at him as he ran a distance away from him. He groaned and started running because he was embarrassed that Quinn had seen him stop. When Quinn returned from completing his run, he saw Eddie sitting on the ground, pulling away at the grass. "Are you done?" asked Quinn. He hadn't chosen to run Eddie's route 5 times because he was sure that Eddie would try to keep up with him despite his warning. And as much as fun it would have been to say, "On your left," as he passed him by, Quinn wanted Eddie to relax and have a positive first day. He would return the next day and keep up till the tryouts and after. Eddie looked up and nodded as he stood up. "Yeah, what's next?" "You will start with push-ups," instructed Quinn before asking, "Can you do a couple of push-ups, or are you a complete beginner?" "I can do 5, replied Eddie, looking offended that Quinn would even think that he was a complete beginner who couldn't do 1 push-up. "Don't give me that face. I was just asking a question," grinned Quinn before continuing. "Do 3 sets of 5. Keep your back straight and properly go down. I don't want to see sloppy push-ups." Eddie nodded and asked, "What are you going to do?" "I'll be doing burpees. They are basically the combination of a squat, kick back feet to get into a push-up stance, high plank positions, a push-up, return to a squatting position, stand, and end with a jump." Quinn showed Eddie how to execute a burpee before both of them started to do their stuff. Eddie did his 3 sets of 5, while Quinn did his 3 sets of 12. At first, Quinn hated burpees because they were tough, but as time went on, they got easier to execute and complete, but that wasn't why he stopped hating them. The results of the burpees made him like doing burpees. After he was half a month in, doing burpees every day, Quinn noticed that his running had improved. He started running faster without consciously ramping up my speed. His lungs felt clear, and he found him coasting through the miles. A month after adding burpees into his routine, Quinn felt that his strides felt stronger and felt that his breathing was more composed than at the start of the month. To Quinn, who ran every day, seeing noticeable improvement was enough for him to keep doing burpees. Quinn was done with 2 sets of 12 when Eddie called to him, "Hey, I'm done. What do I have to do next?" Quinn laid down on the ground, completely flat on his back with his legs bent at knees with feet planted firmly on the ground, about shoulder width apart. "I want you to raise your head and shoulders from the floor and feel your abdominal muscles contract. You don't have to fully sit up, just lift enough till you feel your abdominal muscles contract," instructed Quinn as he showed Eddie how to do a crunch. "Try to avoid pulling your head forward, as it may strain your neck. Lower your head and shoulders back towards your starting position. Remember to exhale as you raise your head and shoulders, then inhale as you lower them." Getting up from the ground, Quinn explained, that is called a crunch. It will target your abs, and if you maybe work really hard and eat right, run a lot, you might show some abs later. "Do you have abs?" asked Eddie, looking down at Quinn's stomach area. Quinn raised his shirt and showed Eddie his stomach. He had a 4-pack, but they were faint and not toned enough to see sharp squares and lacked definition. But Quinn did have visible oblique abs on his side, and a faint V-cut near on his lower waist from practicing Muay Thai every day in the evening. "Holy shit! When did you get those?" exclaimed Eddie as he stared at Quinn's abs before looking up and suggesting, "How about we find a way for you to walk around shirtless? That way, you can showcase the goods, and I can take advantage of the pact when you get a girlfriend." Quinn stared at his friend and thought about how much Eddie had been thinking about getting a girlfriend. He could see gears turning inside Eddie's head, probably thinking about how to use him to get a girlfriend. "What if I don't get a girlfriend?" asked Quinn, a bit interested in the answer that Eddie would give him. "Even if you don't get a girlfriend, there is an excellent, near 100% chance that a lot of girls would flirt with you," said Eddie as he crossed his hands and smiled. "Like a moth to a flame, they will gather around you, and I will be standing there with my net of charisma to trap them under my spell." Quinn blinked a couple of times before speaking, "Cool, cool, cool, but I'd really suggest you change the terminology. No, how about we don't talk about this ever again?" "Yeah, that would be good for both of us." "Huh? Sure, whatever, let me think more about this plan," said Eddie distractedly, thinking about how to exploit Quinn for his future dating life. Ever since Quinn had known Eddie, his friend took action when he got motivated to accomplish something. Last year, Eddie had gotten the news that his family cat, which had been with his family before Eddie was born, had died because of old age. The cat had been very close to Eddie, and he hadn't taken the news well. Eddie had gone into a mourning state for a while after he had gotten the news. During that time, there had been an older Ravenclaw student who was a dickhead and major a-hole. When he found out that Eddie's cat had died, he decided to grace Eddie with his awful presence. Every time the bully had a chance, he would sit near Eddie and loudly talk about how funny it was that Eddie's cat had died. The older bully would regularly corner Eddie when he was alone and urged him to cry. "Are you going to cry? Are you going to cry about it? Like a big baby? Big baby cry over your stupid cat? Everyone's going to see you cry. You're about to cry, aren't you?" And more similar things. At that time, Quinn, who was under the influence of the sin curse, had wanted to rip the bully apart so much that it would haunt him for a lifetime. Eddie had stopped Quinn from brutalizing the dip's hit and had shaken his head with a resolute face while clutching Quinn's arm. Eddie's refusal had been firm enough for then Quinn to back off. But after a month, Eddie had approached Quinn and had asked for his help to teach the older Ravenclaw shitstain a lesson. "I was grieving for my cat. Now I'm done, and I'm feeling angry. Plus, I didn't want you to do something without me," was what Eddie had replied when Quinn had asked about the sudden change in heart. The piece of shit had tried to make Eddie cry, so Eddie decided to turn it the other way. "I found this potion recipe that will make a person cry," has spoken Eddie as he dropped a heavy tome in front of Quinn. "I can't brew this, but I think you can, so brew this for me. That guy wants to see me crying, but I will be the one who's going to see him crying." Quinn still recalled how he had given a smirk that had promised humiliation. He had spent many hours on that project. He had improved the recipe to make it more potent and last longer. After Quinn finished, the recipe he had devised would induce someone to cry like a baby, snot with a constantly runny nose, and make them sweat heavily. Eddie had taken the new potion and had slipped it to the target, sat back, and saw the show unfold. The shithead took the potion and it took maybe an hour before the crying started. Eddie had slipped in the potion during breakfast, so the crying started during a class. McGonagall had to send the crying boy with a runny nose so bad that his handkerchief and sleeves were dripping wet to the hospital wing to get him fixed. Madame Pomfrey had tried to give the snot baby a counter potion that she had concocted. But Quin's potion was a modified recipe that had taken the counter potion for the original recipe into account. The counter potion failed, and the bully was told to stay in the hospital wing until she could brew a flushing potion that would flush out every potion inside the body. When Eddie got the news that the potion had worked, he went with Quin to the hospital wing. Quin made sure that Madame Pomfrey was away and gave Eddie the nod. Eddie had taken one of his potion gloves with him, so when they reached the hospital wing, Eddie was wearing the glove. He then walked to the boy who had made the grieving process so much harder. "Hey, dipshit. You wanted to see me crying, satisfied now," said Eddie as he stood by the bedside. The still crying Ravenclaw's eyes widened when he realized that Eddie was the one who had caused what he was going through right now. "You dash." He tried to speak up, but Eddie tightly clutched his face with his gloved hand, cutting him off. "Everybody saw you, bawling like a baby, and I'm going to spread that you're a crybaby, and make sure it sticks, so even when you graduate from Hogwarts, people will still remember your new nickname," threatened Eddie with a scathing tone. "If you don't want things to get worse, stay away from me, don't talk to me. Don't even look at me. If I'm walking towards you, turn the other way round. I don't want to see your ugly mug ever again." Eddie jerked his hand from his face and wiped it off on the stunned bully's hair before adding, "It seems Madame Pomfrey doesn't have the counter potion. It takes 3 days to brew a flushing potion, so get ready to face the snot fest for 3 days, because you aren't going anywhere else." He smirked and added one last bit. "When someone drinks a flushing potion, the person goes through hours of vomiting and violent diarrhea. I'm sure you'll enjoy the experience. Good luck." Eddie turned back and walked out of the hospital wing without turning around. Quin, who was still standing inside the hospital wing, waited until Eddie was out to take a picture of the boy in the bed from a borrowed camera the second the subject looked his way. After clicking the photo, Quin spoke with gestures, "Talk, and this goes out to everyone." He gave a wide smile with a wave before exiting the hospital wing. Eddie, who was coming back to the real world after thinking about exploiting Quin to get himself a girlfriend, noticed a smile on Quin's face. "Why are you smiling?" Quin looked at Eddie with the smile still on his face and replied, "I was remembering the crybaby incident. That day at the hospital wing was fun." Eddie's eyes shined in remembrance. He nodded with a small smile, "Yeah, that was a fun day. I was so cool that day." Quin nodded before jutting his chin towards the ground and said, "Enough chit-chat. Drop and give me 3 sets of 10. I'm worried about you. I'll make you work hard and sweat away all that pent-up horny energy you have inside you." "You don't have to say it like that," complained Eddie, causing Quin to laugh. The two buddies continued to have fun first thing in the morning. Chapter 90, Baby Steps Against the Whirlpool. Quin sighed as he rubbed the insignia from the third vault safety mechanism. He really wanted to know how this tattoo could teleport the bearer. Assuming that no person was casting a portkey or a similar spell, then there was an enchantment that could produce teleportation magic without human or any magical species' help. Both the first and this vault had complex runic and warding magic, noted Quin as he looked into the triangular entrance to the whirlpool. Just how much planning and execution went into creating the vaults? The people who created them must have given all of it a lot of thought when creating them. Quin still usually went inside the first vault to do research and learn more about the mechanism. He would collect the energy from Absolute Zero for his engraver and make observations for an upcoming project that he was working on. But all the time, including last year, when Quin had become greedy towards a lot of things, and one of them was Absolute Zero. He had tried hard to figure out a way to get the Absolute Zero out of the vault. But Quin still didn't know a way to create a portable containment system that would allow him to carry the Absolute Zero without dead freezing everything around and causing a long-term climate change that would plunge Hogwarts into an ice age for decades to come. Whoever built the first vault knew what they were doing. The builder had used the energy from the Absolute Zero to trap itself. A self-sustained system that wouldn't degrade as long as the prisoner itself stayed strong. It was clear that the builder who had made the rune cluster knew how Absolute Zero worked, because without an understanding of the alchemic material that was being contained, without the proper knowledge of the power source and runes, the containment arrangement would have collapsed a long time ago because of the corrosive, cold energy from Absolute Zero. Standing inside the third vault, Quinn went into thinking about the first vault, the icy vault, for several minutes, before taking a sharp breath and shaking his head. Not the right time or place, Quinn, berated Quinn himself, looked at the ceiling of the cave, and said, "Sorry about that." Quinn talked to the third vault as if it was a girl, apologizing because he was thinking about another girl while on a date. "Let's effing go," said Quinn to hype himself as he looked at the triangular entrance. Quinn loosened his body, wriggled his arms and legs, and made sure he was ready before running towards the triangular water-filled entrance where was Poseidon's wrath. He felt the water cover his body, immediately followed by a tug on his body, and with a ripple in the water, Quinn was gone. Scene break. After a momentary loss of his sensation, Quinn's senses returned, his eyes showed him the raging water, his ears made him hear the loud and continuous splashes of water, he could feel the moisture in the air against his skin, his sense of smell detected the heavy scent of water. Finally, even his tongue sent a signal of a nearby presence of water. This time, though, Quinn wasn't surprised and was ready for the sudden teleportation. He turned upside down, away from the water, faced upwards, and immediately used one of the spells he had come to look forward to. The second the magic triggered, Quinn stopped dead in the air, the charm slowed his body's velocity to zero, to the point he was no longer falling and stayed in a spot in the air. Arresto Momentum was a fascinating spell that was capable of slowing the velocity of the target. If used properly, it could also stop the target completely. Of course, there were limitations to the Arresto Momentum spell. First, the difficulty of slowing down objects was directly proportional to the initial velocity of the object. The faster the speed of the target, the more magic and skill from the user it would take to slow down the target. Factors like mass, surface area, and acceleration of the target all added to the spell's difficulty. For example, an object dropping at its terminal speed would be much tougher to slow down than an object thrown from the top of a short building. Second, if an object was brought to a complete stop, it would get harder to keep it stationary if the object moves, while it's held stationary with magic. Any external force that wasn't in work before the complete stop would be against the nature of the magic, and would break the spell after certain limits. If Quinn wriggled his body in the situation he was currently in, he would break the spell and he would continue to fall. A turn of the head, curl of his wrist, or anything minor wouldn't threaten to break the spell. Anything greater than some minor movements would exponentially increase the difficulty of keeping himself stationary in the air. So Quinn had to make sure he didn't make any excessive movements. As such, he first turned his backside to the vortex so that his front body would be facing upwards. Quinn could have used the levitation spell, Wingardium Leviosa, on his clothes to anchor himself in the air, just like the creator, Jarlath Hobart, had done in the first public use of the charm, even though at that time Hobart himself didn't understand what he had created. Nonetheless, that wasn't possible because Quinn only had a pair of trunks on him and those weren't enough to anchor himself in the air. "Well, I could have transfigured clothes to provide more support," considered Quinn before lightly shrugging. "Whatever, I like this spell better." Quinn looked up above and smiled because his conjecture was correct. "I knew I was right, this is an expanded dimension," chuckled Quinn, watching the pure white ceiling and walls of the place he was currently in. The white walls were telltale signs that this was a created dimension like the one in his suitcase. "Okay, you can do it." "No pressure," reassured Quinn as he took in several deep breaths before taking an extra deep breath and stored it inside his lungs, and eked out without breathing out. "Here I come." The magic stopping his fall disappeared, and Quinn began falling. In the short few seconds of his fall, Quinn crossed his hands over his chest and made sure that he would enter the whirlpool feet first. Quinn entered the water vortex with a loud splash and immediately sank inside the raging water. Inside the water, Quinn held his breath as he allowed the turbulent flow to pull him. He kept his body flat as a board and seized his body straight in order to not get hurt from the water. He hadn't transfigured the gill respiratory system that allowed him to breathe underwater because it didn't work inside chaotic water. Even while in the Great Lake, Quinn maintained a calm water envelope to allow a stable water flow, because he used water magic to push himself to speeds greater than any aquatic species he knew. Plus, the bubblehead charm was also completely out of the race because it was too fragile and would pop the second Quinn entered the raging water. So why was Quinn diving inside the most dangerous waters he had experienced without proper breathing measures? Well, the motive of this dive was to observe the conditions inside the water so he could gather some data. Last time, the sudden teleportation had taken Quinn by surprise, so he didn't get a clear read on the conditions. But this time, he was ready and was getting a feel of the current with his body. Quinn had made a plan to get his transfigured gill respiratory system work in his current conditions, but he needed physical data to verify if his method would work. The flow of the water inside the maelstrom was rough, and the last time, Quinn had experienced water entering his body through the gill side. This wasn't suitable because the water was supposed to enter through his mouth and gently flow over the gill leaves before exiting through the gill flaps. Water entering through his gills with speed could injure his lungs and cause complications that Quinn didn't want to deal with. So before implementing the changes that would allow him to breathe in his current conditions, Quinn needed the physical data that would roughly show that his idea would work. Hence, for 3 minutes, which was his limit for holding his breath, Quinn, with his eyes closed, focused all his attention on his body, feeling the water current, carefully and consciously perceiving the water velocity. When Quinn felt he couldn't hold his breath any longer, he sent magic to the insignia, and at a certain point, he felt the tug of teleportation. Right after, Quinn disappeared from inside the water. Scene break. With a ripple in the water inside the triangular entrance, Quinn came out with water surrounding him as it laid him on the floor before disappearing without a trace. Quinn opened his eyes and immediately took long breaths of air. He laid on the floor for half a minute before sitting up and saying, "Okay, that was good." He got up and started to pace around the room, a look of deep thought evident on his face. Quinn had got the physical data he was looking for, and the results he observed looked positive. Now he just needed to do some calculations and make some decisions before he could get started. "All right, I need to increase the thickness. The flow was on the higher end of my safe zone," muttered Quinn and did more calculations in his head. "Do I need to have them inside or outside? Nope, not inside, the gills have nerves, and I'll definitely feel pain. Yep. Definitely on the outside. I will need to eject water as usual, but it will take more effort this time around," groaned Quinn with a sigh. If only the gillyweed potion didn't have side effects on repeated consumption. Gillyweed was a magical plant that, when eaten, allowed a human to breathe underwater. It was said to resemble a bundle of slimy, grey-green rat tails. When eaten, it gave the consumer gills, allowing them to breathe underwater, and webbing between the fingers and toes, allowing them to swim underwater with ease. Then, there was the gillyweed potion, which would enhance the effects of the original plant. The gillyweed, when brewed into a potion, would increase the efficiency of the plant by multiple times, and would allow the consumer to breathe underwater for a few hours, in the same amount of gillyweed that would only allow 1 hour of underwater breathing. The advantage of consuming gillyweed was that the respiratory system given by the plant was automatic. Quinn had taken the potion while traveling around the world, and at that time, he only had needed to gulp in water, and his work was done. The muscles given by the magical plant took care of everything. Quinn's system was entirely manual, and he needed to direct the water into his lungs and then eject it through the gill openings using water magic. If Quinn wanted the automatic system, then he would either have to research aquatic creatures in more depth than he had done, or he would need to transfigure his body into an aquatic species as Victor Crumb did. Quinn didn't think that doing more research was worth the returns, and changing himself into another animal wasn't something Quinn was thrilled about. But there were the side effects of consuming raw gillyweed or the gillyweed potion when taken regularly. The side effects included developing fish-like features, pale and oily skin, webbing between fingers and toes, and the worst, fishy breath and, similarly, fishy body odor. From the second Quinn confirmed that the third vault was going underwater, he knew gillyweed wouldn't be in his plan. Quinn knew he was going to spend a lot of time in the water. There was no way he was going to keep consuming gillyweed every time he went into the water. "Okay, I'm done," declared Quinn, raised both his hands above his head and closed his for a few seconds before opening them. "Come on, you can do it." Quinn channeled his magic through his body, and the muscles under the skin of his neck and chest wriggled violently before his skin split apart and grew into gill flaps. From the outside, there was nothing different from before, but Quinn could feel the changes inside. He immediately walked towards the triangular entrance and touched the safety water orb. The orb got sucked in, and once again, Quinn had the royal blue teleportation insignia on his arm. As Quinn's upper body immersed in the water, he felt the breath of life return to him. He gulped in more water. "All right, it's working in calm water," affirmed Quinn as he flexed his gill muscles and felt the new addition working on his commands. "Let's hope it will work in the vortex." Quinn teleported with a ripple in the water and a tug on his body. The second the water teleported him into the air, Quinn conjured a pair of swimming goggles over his eyes and crossed his arms over his chest. Quinn said out loud his last words before plunging into the water, "Let's go." The water swept him away, and with a prayer to the water gods, Quinn took a couple of big gulps of water into his body. He felt the water travel through his body. Some water diverged to his neck gills while the majority went to his lungs. Quinn patiently waited for the water to cover the gills and spread over the blood vessels inside the gill leaves. The oxygen moved from the oxygen-rich water to the oxygen-deficient blood inside the blood vessels. Now came the main event, the climax of Quinn's motive today. The problem with his respiratory system was that the turbulent water would rush into his restructured lungs through the gill openings. Thus, in order to fix that problem, Quinn turned to biology to find a solution. And Quinn didn't have to travel far because the answer was inside the human body all along. The human heart consisted of 4 chambers, 2 upper chambers and 2 lower chambers. There was a valve through which blood passed before leaving each heart chamber. These valves prevented blood from flowing backwards. These valves were actual flaps located on each end of the 2 lower heart chambers. They acted as one-way inlets of blood on one side of a ventricle and one-way outlets of blood on the other side of a ventricle. As the heart muscle contracted and relaxed, the valves opened and shut, letting blood flow into the lower chamber and upper chamber at alternate times. Quinn realized that his water problem was somehow similar to how the water rushed from the wrong direction. He needed to stop that backflow, so he decided to copy the heart valve system. Quinn increased, first of all, the size of the valves and made them more sturdy than the heart valves, because the pressure of water from the undertow was much higher than the pressure created by a human heart. He devised a layer in these valves that would sit under the gill flaps and above the actual gill leaves that held the blood vessels, so after the water was done with the gas exchange, Quinn would guide it towards the valve layer. When the gill flaps would open to let the water out, the valve layer would stop the water from rushing in. And then Quinn would loosen the valve muscles and push out the water with water magic. He would have the initiative as the valve openings were small enough to give Quinn the advantage and eject the water like jet streams, opposing the backflowing water at the same time. This was all theory, and now came the time to see if the system would work in real-life conditions. The batch of water went through the gills, and, as it moved on for ejection, Quinn opened the gill flap. Immediately, he felt the water from outside trying to rush in, but in times of need, Quinn's new valve cover held strong against the water. That observation and success brought a smile to Quinn's face as he confidently moved on to the next stage, which was loosening the valves for ejection. Quinn readied his water magic and covered the water inside with his magic while simultaneously slowly loosening the new gill valves. When the valves opened up, Quinn commanded the water to shoot out, and it obeyed and went out, flowing against the water flow outside. Inside Quinn's body, the water had formed a blob with Quinn's water magic in control of every droplet. As the water went out, it acted as a seal that didn't let water inside, emptying out Quinn's reconstructed lung cavity for the next batch of fresh water. The process was successful, and the blood had fresh oxygen circulating around Quinn's body. Quinn, who felt the success, raised both his hands on instinct above and kicked his legs. Immediately, he lost his balance, which made him tumble and rotate inside the vortex. "It!" screamed Quinn as he triggered the safety insignia for the second time and disappeared away. Scene break. In the stone chamber, Quinn had a big smile on his face. He was happy even though he had to deploy his safety measure. "I definitely need more practice on the valve system to make sure that I can do it more easily," smiled Quinn and laughed as he joked. "I'm coming for you, Aquaman. One day, I will rule Atlantis." "Wait, is Atlantis a city here? Oh, another thing I have to check out." Goody! Quinn West had found a way to safely breathe in turbulent water, which was a first step in his exploration of the third vault. This marks the end of part 29 of the story, Magical Journey in Harry Potter World. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.